Good evening. Welcome to MUFON Los Angeles. My name is Steve Murillo, and I'm the State Section Director for MUFON LA. We have a great program tonight. We bring to you Kiwoni Lapsaritis, who is a world authority on the Bigfoot Sasquatch phenomenon and has meticulously researched the subject for the last 48 years of his life. In addition to his professional qualifications as a holistic health practitioner, a master herbalist, he has a background in anthropology, psychology, conservation, and holistic health. He is also a social scientist, a master dowser, and both a Bigfoot and ET experiencer. Kiwoni, his interests in the Sasquatch phenomenon have sent him on a world travel, including an expedition to the Himalayas in 1968 to investigate the Yeti, or so-called abominable snowman. In 1973, he conducted an ethnographic study in conjunction with the Columbian Institute of Anthropology in Bigfoot, living amongst the Ticuna Indians of the Upper Amazonia. In his lecture, Kiwoni will present some of the physical evidence of the existence of Sasquatch, which has been ignored by the mainstream scientific community, who prefer to wait until an actual specimen is caught. Despite our modern technology and push into the wilderness areas, however, we have not yet captured one, and Kiwoni believes he has the answer as to why. He maintains that they are very highly psychic and very intelligent and can disappear at will. In his book, The Psychic Sasquatch, Kiwoni describes documented cases that suggest Bigfoot not only has advanced abilities, but is also a very gentle species that will not tolerate violence. Their psychic ability allows them to sense danger or the ill will of anyone entering their area of the forest, hence their elusiveness. Kiwoni backs these claims up with hundreds of eyewitness reports and his own field research. Even more amazing is the many first-hand accounts that indicate Bigfoot works in conjunction with extraterrestrials as their guards and scouts. Kiwoni has been a frequent media guest and is often featured in books and international press. In 1991, he was on a panel of scientists on a 2-hour Bigfoot documentary on national television. Let's all give him a warm welcome and welcome Kiwoni Lapsaritis.
Thank you for having me here tonight. I'd like to thank Sandra Marsh and her colleagues for their hospitality and for having me here. Now, there are a lot of people here today. Many of them are researchers in the UFO area, and it's difficult to get data from elusive phenomena. Now, tonight I'll be speaking, of course, on the anthropology of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and this area has been ignored so much by mainstream science, especially anthropologists, that feel that they need a corpse or bones first in order to make any kind of study in this area legitimate. And of course, I disagree. I've been doing this for almost 5 decades, and in the very beginning, I believed that they were a type of primitive Indian. Not Indians per se, but to live like a primitive type of Indian. That is, without technology, without a lot of tools, but living in the forest, since they certainly don't have teepees or wigwams or anything like that, but living in caves and sometimes even making beds out of boughs of trees that would be maybe 10 feet long and 4 to 5 feet wide and about probably 4 or 5 inches thick. I found many of these beds in Oregon. Now, I'm both a social scientist and a contactee. I've had contact with ETs and with the psychic Sasquatch. For the longest time, I avoided using the word contactee. It made me very nervous. I felt it would hurt my credibility. And when someone referred to me as a contactee, they said, "Oh, you're a contactee then." And I kind of jumped a little bit and finally said, well, I guess I am, you know. But I wanted to remain objective, and I feel that I have. As a matter of fact, being a contactee and having over 700 contacts over the last 25 years, is 25 years this month that both ETs and Sasquatch started to telepath to me and speak with me, and it's still going on to this day. It's an ongoing phenomena with me. I've sent them to different people. Some people they didn't want to be around, so they didn't go to. But as a matter of fact, I have a guest at my home outside of Seattle in the foothills of the Cascades from England. And over the phone, I was joking with her about certain things, and then I got serious, and I mentioned that, you know, my life is very consumed with my work, which is as a holistic health consultant specializing in cancer and life-threatening diseases. And many doctors refer people to me, and I've worked in this field as a master herbalist. And also, of course, doing my own research. And I said to her, well, you know, when you come here, I'll ask them to come to you. And she said, oh, that'd be great. And she laughed. And this week she said, you know, I was only kidding, because she's had 3 encounters already. And yesterday at 4 o'clock, she had an encounter out on my lawn. It's not much of a lawn because it's deep forest, but there is a lawn there that I have to mow, a small lawn, where I often see deer, pheasant. They've seen a mountain lion there in my driveway, and I've seen eagles while I'm washing dishes out my kitchen window. So it's a very wonderful area for this, and here this person has no interest in this phenomena whatsoever, and she told me that there's a whole page full of information that he gave her telepathically about me, and some things about my spiritual path that he wanted to share with me. So this is nothing new. I had, let's see, they contacted me 6 times last year. So some of the things that they say are of a practical nature in helping me, and if I don't ask them, they'll say to me, well, we're here to help you, so ask us if you want anything. And they won't just help just because they're there, but they told me that they had been monitoring me my entire life. Now, I've documented, actually to date, 106 people who've had Bigfoot UFO, Bigfoot telepathic experiences. In my book, The Psychic Sasquatch and Their UFO Connection, there is 76 people who've had those experiences. And my book came out 6 years ago. So again, now it's 106 that I've documented. Some of them are doctors, physicians, professors, grandmothers, all kinds of people, government officials even, that have had these experiences with telepathy and UFOs directly affiliated with Bigfoot, Sasquatch. And this is a worldwide problem. Now, I mean, how I was trained is that science is set up to investigate and to document and to categorize phenomena that we don't understand, to put it in a perspective in terms of planet Earth and where it belongs here and why it's here. Now, I don't feel that mainstream science has done their job. They're too busy at times even poo-pooing this kind of research, but it has to be done. It's there. It's a phenomena that's there. And initially I felt a little uncomfortable at times when people questioned me. I was very low-keyed about it. In fact, when I first had my first encounters 25 years ago, I said, well, I'm sure not going to tell anyone about this because nobody's going to believe me anyway. And as time went on, I had more and more and more encounters with them. This is everywhere I go, no matter what state I move to. And I've traveled all over the world to over 40 countries, and I've lived all over the United States. I moved up to Seattle 5 years ago from Tucson, Arizona. I was in Oregon before then, and then Wisconsin before then, and so on. So I'm find that they're everywhere. Everyone has something to say, no matter what. I've stopped in restaurants and bars and different places. Not that I frequent bars, I certainly don't. But I remember outside of Bend, Oregon, I was traveling through and actually moving to Roseburg, Oregon, and I drove through town, and then I said, wait a minute, I didn't stop and get anything to eat, that I've been driving, so I went to the first place because it was all woods everywhere, and it happened to be a country bar. And so I went in, had a sandwich, and the guy next to me looked at me and just started talking, and I thought, well, I got nothing to lose, they'll never see me again. And so I said, say, you know, I said, this may sound strange, but I'm kind of interested in this, but do you know anyone around here who's had an encounter with Bigfoot? And I braced myself from time to time because I figured, well, you know, they're going to, you know, laugh at me or throw up their hands or something. And he said, oh yeah, wait a minute. He says, Bob down at the end of the bar here has, and he called to Bob, and Bob comes over and tells me his story, and he said, gee, too bad George is in here, and so on, and he had an encounter too. And within 10 minutes, George walks through the door, and they call him over, and they can't wait to talk to me about it. So there are situations, in fact, I don't know if these people were drinking, that's why they said something, but they were very serious in telling me this. So my point is that no matter where I go, I still have people telling me about this. Another example, I just had a cord of wood brought in for the winter at my place, and the woodcutter brought it in. I had been at my place there a year last winter for me. And I stopped at his house to ask about the wood last week, and his son was there, who lives in Montana but's visiting him. And there were a couple of other men sitting in the living room there having coffee. And the subject of Bigfoot just happened to come up. And his son said to me, you know, I had an encounter with Bigfoot. And he told me about it. And the guy sitting across the room, now his father didn't even know about it. And the man sitting across the room turned around and said, well, I did too. I want to tell you my story, what happened. And he told me his situation. So here's just two people in a house, and I'm just stopping not to see them, but to see the father and the woodcutter, and there's more information. So I'm not afraid to ask. It's very, very important that people ask, and you know, I don't care anymore. I just want the data, I want objective data, and I want this information that will be helpful in putting this phenomena in perspective. It's a worldwide problem. I've been in contact with Russian scientists. I've been in contact with Chinese scientists, even Australian. This phenomena is going on all over the world. Japan, England, Scotland, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and other islands in the South Pacific. Of course, it's also, I was in Latin America 4 different times and twice to the Amazon, and I lived on the Amazon among the Ticuna Indians. And the phenomena's down there. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. In the Amazonian rainforest has 2,230,000 square miles of the last vast wilderness left. And they are starting to discover all kinds of things, especially because of their cutting timber and not only the logging, but the prospecting and mining. I don't agree with any of it. One of my degrees is in conservation from the University of New Hampshire, and I've I don't call, out here, especially in Seattle, I don't call myself an environmentalist, even though I am in that sense. But the environmentalists there spike trees and do all kinds of things, and I'm a pacifist, so I don't really believe in doing that. I believe in educating the public and educating as many people as possible, in spite of the fact that the corporate people have the say on the land. And when I go out into wilderness areas and see it clear-cut and a total mess, and the loss of the topsoil and everything else, I find it appalling, especially because now that the forests are being opened up again for logging. In fact, one Sasquatch said to a man, "Why do you go in and cut so many trees in these areas?" And he said, "You mean clear cutting?" And the Sasquatch said, "Yes, this is all telepathic." And he says, "Because we build houses and stuff." And he says, "A house? What's a house?" And he drew a house for him in the dirt. And he said, "Oh, you mean your nest, where you live?" And so they are, in many, many ways, the Sasquatch are the ultimate environmentalists. They are the ones that are so attuned to the environment, so I discovered. They seem to be able to communicate with their environment on every level. On every level. They've been seen with wolves. They've been seen with cougar walking beside them. This particular man, and it's in my book, under Spiritual Keepers of Mother Earth, that he found an arrow in a deer that was weak. And he caught the deer, because it couldn't hardly move, and pulled the arrow out and poured some disinfectant on it, and then made some porridge out of oatmeal and let it cool down, and then fed it to the deer to give it strength. And he put a rope around it and tied it to a tree temporarily, and he camped early where he was by himself in order to care for the deer. And then when it was strong enough, after a couple days, he released it. But the Sasquatch came in and sat on a log about 20 feet from him, 15, 20 feet, and started talking to him. And he said, "Well, why don't you talk with other people?" And he said, "Well, I've been watching you." He said, "You're the one that's been following me, because I hear snapping of twigs and stuff." He said, "Yes, I've been following you." But he said, "You've treated this animal so well that I knew that you're a good person." And he says, "Other people are not so nice." He says, "They shoot a deer, and they may cut off the head or just cut the hind end off and leave the rest of it." And he said, "That's not right." He says, "Your people don't respect the environment." If this sounds familiar in terms of Native American philosophy, it's true. Any indigenous people of the world will speak that way, who lives that close to nature. I don't care if it's the Australian Aborigines, whom I talked to when I immigrated to Australia back in the 60s. No matter where it is, they will talk in terms of the environment. And why? Because that's where they make their living. That's where they fish and hunt and make things that they need and gather their herbs. Even New Zealand and Indonesia have Sasquatch reports that are not that are more frequent than people realize. It's just not getting the press. I talked to a man many years ago and got to know him, and he's done some work for me. He used to work for Walt Disney Productions, a very talented man, and he was camping out, I believe this was about 25 years ago, in New Zealand. And he got up at night to relieve himself, and some huge two-legged being, and there were two of them. One walked up first, and they walked right up beside the tent, and he was apparently, about 30, 40 feet from the tent. And he got scared because of, again, the stride and the weight that he could hear when it walked up to the tent. So he waited until the two beings walked away, and then he climbed back into the tent, and his partner there, his friend that he was hiking with, said, "My God, what was that?" He said, "There's some huge animal walked up to this tent." He said, "Yeah, I heard it." So the next morning, they looked around for tracks, and they could see it was matted down, but they couldn't make out any tracks. And so as best they could, they followed it. And he said they started out 7 o'clock in the morning. And the next thing they knew, they were walking back into camp and the sun was going down, and they looked at each other and said, wait a minute, where did we go today? Where did the time go? And they looked at each other and said, I don't know. What happened? He said, I don't remember anything. He said, I don't either. They were gone almost 12 hours and they don't remember anything. Were they taken by a UFO? Or another explanation would be that the Sasquatch have the ability to do what I call telepathic hypnosis. They've talked to many different people, and then they have the ability to suggest that they won't remember, either out of fear or because they don't want them to tell other people where they're at. So these are very, very evolved beings. The paradox, of course, is that you have this giant creature that has hair, not fur, that has hair on their bodies, have an ape-like look to the face, and or a cross between an ape and a human, and people label it a monster. And they're figuring that because it can kill deer with its bare hands and walk into a farmer's place and pick up a 500-pound pig under its arm like you would a kitten. They're very, very strong and powerful, and they have to eat too. And they do certain things like that, so they're labeled, dangerous animals. But, you see where black bears and grizzlies have killed people. It's not as often as you might think, but they sensationalize many of these things with bears. But you don't really see this with Sasquatch. So it should give people an idea that what they're dealing with. The group that consult with me and that I've gone out with a few times, that go up into the Washington Cascades, have had boulders thrown at them, big rocks thrown at them, but they always are on the side. No one has ever been hit, even though they come with tremendous force to hit maybe a bank behind there or the land behind them, saying that get out of this area. Either their families they're feeding or they have young, and they don't trust these people. They don't trust most people, but I've discovered they select certain people. In the Native American cultures, the shamans, and I am a shaman myself, that would be contacted by these beings periodically because the beings are attracted to people of a high spiritual vibration. People who want to hunt them have a low spiritual vibration. They want to kill and destroy something, so they have no interest in being around such people. So they have been contacted, the Native American medicine people have been contacted over the years by the Sasquatch people, even ETs, the star people, who will land and have talked to many of these holy men. And so this goes back thousands of years. This is nothing that's, in recent times. It's just that our world has gotten so much smaller with communication all over the world that we are able to get this information out, especially right now, on the internet, you can find out all this information. What happened last week, and go to different websites in different parts of the country. So it seems like, this is all new stuff, but it's just a new encounter. It's the same thing that's been going on for many, many years. And of course, to complicate all this with the Bigfoot are the ET UFO phenomena that's been reported by Native Americans as well. People don't realize that other indigenous peoples of the world, like the Australian Aborigines, have been contacted by star people and by the Sasquatch, what they call the Dunnigan people, for centuries. I don't know how far back. They claim thousands of years, so I really don't know how far back. But they taught their people, they taught them how to survive in these wild areas. So again, the Australian Aborigines didn't feel they needed to hunt them down and to categorize them and to destroy these beings. However, there were some areas of Australia, and even the Winnebago Indians told me that the tribes of the Bigfoot people were cannibals, that they did eat people periodically in the past, and it isn't all of them. Why only certain ones, I do not know. I mean, there's missing people in areas periodically. I mean, a cougar could have got a person, or any number of things could have happened. And if they are out there still, there's not many that are doing this, or almost none, or maybe none anymore. I mean, I really don't know, but I suspect there could be. Somehow, the Bigfoot people and the Star people who have been coming to me guide me so I don't get into bad situations in the wilderness. And I've got lots of wilderness skills, and I backpacked around the world and lived in East Africa for 2 years, and so on, and just I really don't have the fear that the average person does, and I've taken lots of risks, all over the world with going into areas that I could have been killed. But I wanted the experience. I wanted to understand what is going on. And the people who study crocodiles, for example, they bring you a lot of nice information on the Discovery Channel, but, I don't know of any that have been killed by them. It's mostly just, people in canoes and other taking risks. When I lived in Ethiopia, they had a risk where one of the Peace Corps workers went for a swim, and he was told not to, and a 17-foot crocodile got him. So these are risks, I guess, in any kind of a job, and it is a job for me in a sense. It's a job I love. The Bigfoot UFO connection is a hard one for many people. I have a difficult time with mainstream Bigfoot researchers. Some of them stay at arm's length from me because they don't believe in a Bigfoot UFO connection. They don't believe Bigfoot is a nature people with paranormal abilities. Well, I really myself don't believe in a Bigfoot UFO ET paranormal connection. I don't believe it. Why? Because it has nothing to do with belief. It has to do with what I scientifically documented over the last 49 years. And that's what it has to do with. And 106 people who've had these experiences that needed someone to discuss them with, and there's nobody out there that wanted to discuss this. Now, what these Bigfoot researchers do, many of them have done a wonderful job and produced books and so on, but it generally has the tone of exploitation, of getting books and especially shooting of one of the creatures. And they say, some people said, well, we only, like Dr. Grover Krantz, the physical anthropologist from Washington State University, said, well, we only need one to prove it, so, we're only going to shoot one. And I almost wanted to say to him, well, maybe they want one of us there, and maybe you'd want to volunteer. And so let's put it in perspective, people. And you're killing someone's father, brother, son, because they are a people. And I had a woman who was doing research, and she said, I would never hurt a Sasquatch. We don't carry guns, and anyone that comes out with a gun, we send them away. We tell them we don't want anything to do with them. She said, but I'm trying to get a baby and catch it, one of these little baby ones, and take it. She says, you mean you'd kidnap people to hurt the mother? The mother would be destroyed. The whole family would be. So people here, and I say a Western man here, our perspective of reality and nature is very warped, that we need to be closer to nature and not farther from it, and to understand, and one of the best understandings I know is to spend time with Native American people, the First Nations. I studied with them, with the medicine woman, Kiwe Denokwe, which is a woman of the Northwest Wind. She was Ojibwe. I went out on her island in Lake Michigan and studied with her. I was out there for 5 months. She had seen a 12-foot Sasquatch on the island that I had chose in the end to do research on. And on her island, she had seen, also on that island, she had seen ETs walking around and seen the ships. And she told me on her island a particular place where there's a vortex that leads to another dimension, and that the ETs were using it as well, she said. And she said one day she was picking herbs, and this, she said it happened several times that a ET walked by her. I said, really? Well, what did he look like? And she said, well, a little bit like us, but different. I said, what did you do? I mean, you know, this is something. And she looked at me very casually and a very sober look and said, I just kept picking herbs. So nobody, they have no feeling to capture a Sasquatch or to tackle an ET that's walking around, just to prove this. And I'm at a stage, and have been for some time now, I think for 15 years, where I really don't bring cameras out anymore. I have asked permission for photographs and for video, and never have, so far I have not received it. And if I don't get it, then I don't get it. I have some tonight which you're going to see that's absolutely stunning, but it's none of these I had taken myself. I would not deceive these people. I rather have the experiences that I have had and continue to have more experiences than not to have the Sasquatch people in my life. I'll be going down to Texas in October, where the people down there, it's a farm, they are having experiences with Sasquatch, with the ancient ones, which are the ones that look like they have hair and so on, but they're more human-like and they have human faces. Those are the ancient ones. And then the ETs there in the spaceships that they had been seeing. But they only were seeing and experiencing the Sasquatch, and someone who read my book decided to share it with this family. And when the woman who was having most of the experiences, the woman of the house, and she saw the book and thumbed through it when this man researcher was visiting, she busted out laughing and said, this stuff is a bunch of baloney. She said, I wouldn't read this. She said, this had nothing to do with what's going on here, and tossed my book aside. Within 2 weeks, she had so many experiences that were in that book that she called up the gentleman and said, can I borrow the book? I really need to read it. She says, all this stuff is happening. She says, that you said was in that book. And she says, I'm confused and I want to find out about it. So this whole group that broke away from a Bigfoot organization down there that are on a monster hunt. They use rifles and so on, and they want to bag themselves a Sasquatch. But unbeknownst to these Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, I refer to them as that almost because they have that naivety, and they certainly aren't doing solid research, even though they claim they are. If you're using a gun trying to shoot something you know nothing about, then you have no business being out there or even owning a gun, because they're dangerous. They'll shoot at anything. The ego is so involved. And so I don't buy into that, and I'm very polite to everyone, no matter what area they come from, but as soon as they find out what my area of expertise is and what's been happening to me, they distance themselves as fast as I distance myself from them with their guns and their wanting to kill and destroy. Also, keep in mind that there is about 1% or less than 1% of people ever report their sightings of a Sasquatch. Never mind to say, gee, there was we saw this spaceship land in our back field, and later that night, for the first time, the dogs went wild, and there was these creatures, these Bigfoot standing at a window looking in. And I mean, I've heard this over and over and over again. But guess what? PhD anthropologists, PhD psychologists, physicists, wildlife biologists, and so on, they'll never get any of this information unless they leave the great womb of the university and stop being armchair theorists and get off their duff and get out there. And I don't mean on a weekend, and I don't mean sometimes they go for 1 or 2 weeks. Even 3 weeks, they think that's a lot. You need more time than that to deal and interact and find a Sasquatch. So I've gone for 2 years at a time, in 5 months in one place, staying there, waiting for them to come to me. I would meditate every day, pray every day, do the same things they do. I would go for walks, I'd be studying herbs, picking culinary herbs, edible herbs, medicinal herbs, and so on. And I camped out in one area completely for 5 months. So this taught me a lot. And I had a Potawatomi medicine man, a friend of mine who's now in spirit, said every evening, face west and put your arms out and pray. Pray to God. If you say you pray every day, then pray to the Great Spirit and thank Him every day for all the wonderful things that happened to you that day. And I started doing that at this moment in time. This was back in 1981. And I stood there and I listed everything. Thank you, dear God and Great Spirit, for this and that. And the most amazing things started happening. Wild animals would come out of the forest. This is every single night. And these rabbits would come around, 2 of them, and they chased, while I'm praying, they would run around me, they'd stop and put their paw up on my leg and look at me. These woodcock, they're these kind of a very chesty little bird with a very long, pointed bill. They fly very low and straight, and 2 of them, a pair of them, would fly in every single evening and land at my feet and stay there. I had all kinds of whippoorwill would land on my head, and so on. All these things would be happening while I'm praying. Why? Because I've started to merge literally into the oneness of nature. It's not a cute philosophy at all. It's the real thing if you practice it. And the people who are very critical of the type of research I'm doing at the universities and so on, and even in these Bigfoot organizations, are the ones that are missing out on everything, because if they'd only take the time to learn, some of them are so aggressive that I don't think they'd ever learn. They would need a few years of psychotherapy first to release all the things that emotional baggage, the negativity they're carrying into the field that the Sasquatch can pick up on and will leave the area and never even get near them. And, it sounds a little humorous, me saying that, but that is the reality. That is the reality. You must really have love in your heart and hold on to that love. I don't know how many times I've had to stop at someone's home and on business, and I was greeted by a dog, and I'd get down and pet the dog. He'd lap my face and all that, and then the owners would come out freaked out, and they said, I can't believe what's going on. And I'd look around and say, well, what are you talking about? What's happening? They said, you And I said, I don't know what you mean. He says, my dog's vicious. He bites everybody. You know, so this didn't happen once or twice. I mean, it's happened probably at least a dozen times or more over the years. Even in Africa, I saw a leopard in a cage, and I couldn't wait to get near it, so I put my hand through the bars and was petting it. And after I pulled it out, the guy came over and said, geez, your arm could have been ripped off. I said, why? And he says, well, it's a leopard. I go, oh, yeah, well, I just felt it was friendly enough. He says, no, it's not a pet. So, you know, I was feeding wild hyenas, 200-pound hyenas, at night, and they'd come up to me, and I'd hand them bone scraps. In fact, one knocked me over because he was kind of blinded by the light. But this is the kind of research that is needed. Someone that loves nature and loves animals and loves people, and not going out with a gun. To me, who's the real monster here? You know, it's the people that want to destroy. There's a lot of problems with the Bigfoot research. When you're dealing with an elusive phenomena, how do you document it? You know, everyone says, well, don't you have pictures? I mean, you know, and scientists will look at a picture, but they don't care. It doesn't prove anything. If that scientist already believes in a Sasquatch, then the picture makes it that much more real for them, even though they're already convinced. But the mainstream one, again, they want a corpse or bones. So it makes it for very difficult. And if I talk about the paranormal experiences that I've had and what I've documented from other people, it makes things even worse. But I'm not going to change my research. I'm not going to delete things in order to please mainstream science. I've given objective documentation, which is in my book, The Psychic Sasquatch, where the majority of Bigfoot researchers, when they get a report of UFOs, telepathy, dematerialization, all of these different phenomena, they throw them away. And then they point their finger at me and says, well, I'm doing scientific research and you're not, because you're talking about the paranormal. And here they're doing subjective data collecting. Who are they to tell people that it's not real when they apparently don't know what's going on in universal nature? Because most of them go out for a couple of weeks or a weekend. And I admit it's difficult. I mean, I had the opportunity to, because when of an inheritance that I had, and it freed me up in order to do this. And I spent majority of the money on it, and I don't regret any of it. I didn't invest it other than in myself, because I want to continue on the spiritual path, and these are spiritual people. I want to hang out with people who are positive and spiritual, and not who are negative or pull me down or want to argue with me about that we should kill a Sasquatch. Peter Byrne is a animal expert, and he used to be a big game hunter in India and other places in Asia, and he of course stopped many years ago. I think it was in the 50s he stopped shooting animals. But one of the things he said was that's unique about Sasquatch. He said Sasquatch is like looking for a needle in a haystack. The only difference is the needle keeps moving around. And so, in a way, that's true. They say, well, Sasquatch wanders. But though they wander, and they're always say they're always by themselves, it's not true. Their family members or clan are very close by, and if you try to do anything, you know, let's just say there was a wounded Sasquatch or something, I would really be careful, because whoever shot it or wounded it is in big trouble, because his members of his family will be there in a short period of time. So there's different clans of them, and I found out that the different clans know who I am. And the furthest away that I've communicated with a Sasquatch is 200 miles. So they themselves, I mean, I heard her and she heard me, and we talked back and forth for about 10 minutes. So they apparently, from what I understand, and they don't sit down and say, well, let's have coffee and I'll dictate to you and tell you what our culture is all about. They don't do that. They, from what I gather, they have the ability to telepath great distances, and they have gatherings from time to time. Different families and clans come together, and they share information. And no matter, it's so interesting because even back in the 80s, people would call me up when I was in Oregon from Washington State and other states and say, gee, I had a Bigfoot encounter and was talking with the Sasquatch, and it shocked me. And all of a sudden he mentioned your name and said I should contact you, that you could explain more to me. So this has happened at least a dozen to 15 times over the years. So they do have some kind of a network where they do understand. Someone here back in May was having a Bigfoot experience, and they talked about me and mentioned my goals because I specialize in cancer and help people with life-threatening diseases. And if anyone's interested, I have my card back there, and I do work at a distance, and anyway, I help a lot of people, and the Bigfoot seem to know that, and I've had them help me and even tell me certain herbs and what to do, and they've talked to me about this. So I feel privileged. I wouldn't want to be anyone else because of what I experienced, but I'm speaking out more and more, and I feel that it's necessary that people understand, because this world, the population of this world has gotten so huge, and there's more and more reports, and I want to put it in more of a spiritual perspective and not a negative one. There's no funding in this area. Again, I use my own funding. I know how to stretch a dollar because you're out in the wilderness, and I gather my own food. I do bring food with me as well, but funding is a problem. So, you know, there's very few full-time researchers out there, almost none, and so it's difficult. So all these years, it's been basically 50 years since it started getting publicity in this country. So in 50 years, what have we accomplished? Well, today, even to this day, you start talking with Bigfoot researchers, they say, I found a track, and I've got a plaster Paris cast. You want to see it? After 50 years, that's all you have to offer? I got so many casts, I don't know what to do with them. I gave them away. It just doesn't mean anything. You can't talk to a cast, plaster Paris cast. You can't gain that much information from it. We found out that there's dermal ridges, which I'll show you in a while here, of saying that these tracks came from a real individual. And the bottom of the track is wavy. Why? Because the foot isn't flat. It's a flat foot in a sense, but if a person stepped in snow or mud and they carved out Bigfoot tracks, every track would be the same, and every track would be flat and level at the bottom. But when you get a real track, you don't see that. You see where they can push away with the ball of the foot. You can see even scars from maybe stepping on a sharp stick or a sharp rock that it bled or whatever, and so there's dermal ridges and there's scars there from a real being. So there is difficulty in obtaining physical evidence. When you're out there, I've collected all kinds of evidence. My evidence was always sent to Dr. Kenneth Sigismund, who is a forensic scientist at the Medical College of Wisconsin, just outside of Milwaukee. And for 25 years, he's been doing all of my analysis. I mean, we need some physical evidence, but you know, again, I prefer to have the interaction, I prefer to learn from them, and I prefer to pass that kind of information on to those people whose spiritual vibrations are high enough that they want to listen and learn from it as well, rather than from, I've talked to scientists about it who were very closed-minded. They believed in Bigfoot, but they didn't believe in anything that I said. And yet they respect me. They said, well, I respect what you say. You're very astute and well-educated, so something's going on, but I'm not into that, so I don't want you to talk about it anymore. They'll stop me from talking about the real data and what's going on. So, and researchers are not very objective. Again, they throw away data that they feel isn't real. Well, let's put it together and share it with someone else. They should have some kind of a collecting agency or an institute that should collect this stuff from people, the research, and let them process and analyze it, and have meetings in groups of people like they do at the Darwin Museum in Moscow. Right now, the group in that, they call themselves hominologists actually in Russia, and those groups of people there are split. Half of them believe in that Bigfoot, and their Bigfoot, because this is all over the world, which they call Almist. In some regions they call them Kaptar, and that's their name for them, are just hominids. That is, they are almost like Neanderthal-type beings that, you know, never became extinct. And the other half of the people there, the hominologists in Russia, feel it has something to do with the paranormal and the UFO connection. In fact, I talked with Dr. Marina Popovich, who at the time, I was speaking at the World UFO Congress at the Riviera Hotel in Las Vegas at the time, and she came up with an interpreter after my talk and said the same thing's going on there. They have all kinds of data, the same that I collected. The Australians told me the same thing, that's the same as in my book. So these are the more brave or courageous people that are stepping forward and saying, I'm going to tell it objectively like it is, and I don't care what people say. And that's the frame of mind that I'm in. Physical evidence to date for the existence of Sasquatch, of course, are your footprints that people find all the time, and then the casts with the dermal ridges. There's handprints, which you'll see later, and which are very interesting because one anthropologist said there's no real opposable thumb, that it looks like they have 5 fingers. You know, I can't comment on that. I'm not a physical anthropologist, but when I looked at the ones that I found, I said, gee, that's true. They don't look like at all like like they have an opposable thumb. I don't know what to make of that, but again, they still have prehensile hands to grip and do things, and they've been seen with like a kettle. They've been seen with looks like blankets and a few other things that you know, they found different places. So their use of tools seems to be very limited, or else my take on it is they don't need technology. We feel we're so superior because we have all this technology, and they don't, so they have to be primitive, they have to be animals, and therefore we can dominate them. We can do what we want and shoot them if we care to. And my answer to that is our technology has superseded our spiritual development. And spirituality is simply respect for all living things, for everything around us. So it's not just a cute philosophy. If you practice these things like we practice you know, going to football games, and make sure if you go to your friend's house, you bring your case of beer or whatever it is that we do, we can retrain ourselves to have a better quality life through greater respect for everyone and including the environment and everything in it. they now have what they call the Skookum casts, which were taken a couple of years ago of a Sasquatch that lay down in an area, and they took plaster Paris and they spread it all over and obtained this body cast. You know, it's not like as when we were kids, you know, in the snow, you'd put your arms out and then fall into a snowbank and you could see your imprint in it. It wasn't like that, but where it had laid down, so you could see the buttocks and so on. Well, that's fine, and we already know they're out there. These scientists that found it know that they're out there, so they've got a couple 100 pounds of plaster Paris. You know, that's good for them. I don't know, it hasn't really done anything for anyone other than people on the fence will come a little bit closer to say, gee, you know, that may be true because this group, and there's scientists in the group, found this cast and did this, so it starts to make people more aware that the Bigfoot are really out there. They found hair, and I found hair as well. I have a short clip later that I'll show you on Dr. Sigismund and his comments on hair, so I'm going to just leave that to him. And it is hair, not fur, even though it has both characteristics of animal and human. So it's very unique, and in a way they are. They're animalistic from the standpoint, because this is a paradox, that they can kill other animals and so on, and yet be very gentle and have the ability to, I mean, the things that they've discussed with me and other people, you wonder if they went to school. But they are aware. They can get close to people and to be invisible and to listen in and to monitor people. And they've been doing this, and then they pass that on to their families. Why? Because it's a survival thing. And that's, to me, they are human. They are humanoid, and they have culture. Why can I say that? Because anthropologists say if you believe in God, that's one of the aspects of culture and being human. If people have a written language or that they pass on an oral traditional language. These are all different factors that they've used. Well, they've talked about God to me and other people. They're very aware of a higher energy, a universal God of some type. And they're passing this information on telepathically to their family. So they are people, and however primitive we want to label that, and I don't even like that word, primitive, that we label them, they still have a culture. And if they are involved, maybe 5% of them may be involved, this is just hypothetical, with the star people on the ships and helping them doing mining work and stuff, which they do. They said this. The other 95% are just living out their lives in the wilderness, trying to stay away from destructive human beings. So, so many people who were doing the research say, look, I've never seen that. Well, put your gun away and you might see it. So they're not, it doesn't mean that every Sasquatch you see just stepped off of a spaceship. That's certainly not true. So we have blood as well. They've analyzed some of the blood. There's blood samples that were taken because they were feeding these Sasquatch out in Tennessee, and they're still doing this. And it got into some, their budget was low, so they didn't have much food to put out, so the Sasquatch went through the garage door that was open and into the cellar and went through some canning stuff that was canned, and they broke the jars and ate the food. And one of them got cut and there was blood everywhere. And they put this together, and each time, this happened twice, that it was sent out to a lab to be analyzed, it never got there. So the first time it happened, I told them, I said, send it then, UPS or FedEx, overnight mail, insure it and all that, and they did, never got there. The government is monitoring many people who are involved with this kind of research. what would the government be interested in a, you know, kind of a being that's simply living off the land and minding his own business, their own business? I mean, they're not bothering anyone. Why would they be interested in that? I mean, but what do they have to offer? They don't have technology. Not unless they're connected with maybe the UFO phenomena, which I believe. I've heard several stories of Sasquatch being killed. I don't know if they're true. I can't verify it. One of them was here in California, where these Marines were out in the forest doing their thing on field trips, and they had loaded guns and so on, and when they got through at night, they gathered together and they were talking, and they heard this crashing coming towards them, and they were afraid because they could hear the thumping of something, and this Sasquatch stepped out, and they all opened up on it and killed it. And one of the officers there called in and said what they had, because they looked at it, and a couple hours later they heard this helicopter come. It was a black helicopter, and they supposedly, I don't know if this is true, but this is what was told to me, that they picked up the Sasquatch and took it away. And when they asked what happened to it, the Marines did, they said, well, it's none of your business. And one of the Marines overheard his superior officers say that it had something to do with the National Security Agency, the NSA, which is a super secret organization in Arlington, Virginia. So, you know, I don't know, but the government is very interested in all this. There's photographs, some of them are good, some of them are not so good. I've had people have photographs and point to them and say, look, isn't that incredible? I said, well, it's the best black shadow I've ever seen, you know, but I really don't see what you see. He said, but it was there. And I said, if it was there, I don't doubt you, but this is not a photograph that's going to convince anyone. I have some today that I'm going to share with you that I think are going to be convincing. There's some videotapes. The videotapes that I've seen, a majority of them were not real. They were somebody in a suit. There's several that were real, and I believe, of course, that the Roger Patterson film that was taken October 20th, 1967 at Bluff Creek, California, taken with a 16mm camera, is the real thing for several reasons. First of all, it was ignored in this country, and the scientists that did see it said that, I believe it was at the Museum of Natural History, simply said that it's a man in a monkey suit, and they walked out. So the thing is that back then, how could they make a monkey suit? You know, monkey suits are kind of loose and so on, and baggy even. And how could, when this creature turned around to look back at the camera, that you can see bulging muscles and rippling muscles in the legs and thigh, the exact same place where they should be? That can only happen if it's a real creature. I asked a Sasquatch in 1985 if he knew of that film, and he said yes. And he said, that's one of our people that got caught off guard. That's what he said to me. I will show you a video this evening that's also very, very convincing. In fact, I will be in Texas and I will be in Tennessee at these places next month, evaluating and doing my own thing to connect with them telepathically. They've already, those in Texas have said to me, well, they passed on from the people at the farm, 3 times they requested that I be there. So they trust me, and that's what's necessary, and that's why I'd never deceive them or tell people their geographic area or anything about them, because people don't know how to interact with these beings properly and, again, in a spiritual manner. I've collected feces, other people have. It's not a very good type of sample to collect because most of what's there, because of the acid and everything, will destroy a lot of the evidence. The one that I had that was sent, I sent it right away, but it was still a few days old when I got it. There was E. coli in it and a lot of fiber, but there was nothing really that we could deduce from what was done with it. I mean, one man in Michigan that I know, has it in a, he had it in his refrigerator for a while, frozen, and then he set up a little cooler kind of thing, and he has it behind glass so you could view the feces. It's the only evidence he was able to get. That's after, 20 years of research. So, saliva. They've gotten some saliva. It's so strange. It's very difficult. It cost about $2,000 to have the DNA tested, and saliva would be excellent. But it's only good for so long, as far as I understand. Again, I'm not a forensic scientist, so there's some areas here that I'm not totally familiar with. But there's a researcher out in Idaho that contacted me a year ago, and last December I was with him inside of this gigantic cave. It was a blizzard outside. We could barely see where we were going. In fact, he ended up in a snowbank one of the times, and it was about 15 inches of snow or so. It was, I believe it was either 5 or 8 above zero, and we trekked into this cave, and actually it was quite nice. It was 42 degrees when we finally got into the deep end of the cave. But we found 2 handprints. He had footprints, handprints he found there, and found out where they've laid down. Interestingly enough, he took 20 hairs that he found by an imprint of one that was sleeping there, and I laid down on it too. And I couldn't believe, it's cold as it was outside, and laying down, it was comfortable. It was not any cold. You would think it'd be damp closer to the ground, and it was not. So he collected 20 hairs and put them in a Ziploc bag, and he was going to have them sent away and have them analyzed. And when he got home and he took out that bag, there wasn't anything in it. And I told him, I said, my take on that is, because he said he tried to figure it out and he had no logic for it. And I said, they apported it out of there. Apportation is having an object appear or disappear in front of you. And some of the avatars in India can do this and appear, things can come out of their ears and those kinds of things. It's like a mini vortex, stuff coming from another dimension. And I've had people say to me that they knew someone that had some kind of a device that was given to them by ETs, and they put it in their drawer at home, and a few days later they went to take it out and it was gone, and they lived by themselves, wasn't anybody around, and that it had, the ETs had apported it out of there because they didn't feel the person was going to use it properly. So these strange things are happening all the time. The saliva, again, more evidence is we couldn't get anyone to do it. I tried to help him, and he ended up sending some of the stuff to France to be done. And I find that very odd. I don't know if the government is saying to people, now if you get this evidence, you're a scientist, refuse it, or whatever. I don't really know. I just feel that they don't want us to know about a lot of things, and this is one of them. Back in 1995, I saw a spaceship at night when I was living in the desert outside of Tucson, Arizona, and I telepathed to it. And I asked at the time, I said, would you come to me or send one of the Bigfoot people to me? And I said, send me some gold or show me where there's gold, because I occasionally would go out prospecting, and it's a lot of fun. I don't take it too seriously. In other words, if I don't get anything, I don't get angry or anything. And I didn't know what to say. I thought I would just say something like that. I says, you know, send me something. And the next morning I woke up, and I had my Comanche, my black lab, who weighed 90 pounds, that slept beside my bed. I woke up the next morning, and there was a round red gemstone in the kitchen sitting on the counter. And I kept looking up and saying, it must have fallen from someplace that I never noticed before. You know, because I was living by myself and knew that it didn't come from me. So I pushed it aside, left it there, pushed it to the side, and just forgot about it. The next night, I woke up in the morning and there were two of them sitting there. I said, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. And I said, does this have anything to do with me telepathing to this spaceship the other night? Well, I don't know about it, and I can't figure it out. I just pushed it aside. So 2 days went by, and there was another one there. And finally, I had a total of 7 of them. And I met a Choctaw medicine man, Indian medicine man, and he said, he says, I've got, he says, they are from the Bigfoot people. And I didn't tell him that I was doing research. I asked him if he knew anything about stuff like this. And he said, oh yeah, he says, but they're from the Bigfoot people. He says, they give them to people, and he says, they sometimes leave even one big white one. He says, if a person's a healer, a shaman. And I had one big white one and 6 red ones. And I said, how do you know this, though, that this is so? And he said, because I have a whole drawer full of them myself. And I said, oh, okay. And I took it to the biggest gem show ever put out is down in Tucson, and I took it there and showed a man who had a microscope, and I said, well, could you analyze this for me? And for $20 he did. And he said to me, I don't know where you got this. He says, I don't see how this could ever be made. And I said, well, it just looks like a piece of glass, red glass to me that's round and everything. He said, no, he said, but there's gold in the middle of it. And he said, I have no idea how this could be. Now he says, for $100, he says, I'll take this back to LA, he said, be able to cut it in half and be able to tell you what's in it. I said, no. I said, nothing's going to be destroyed. He says, where did you get this? I said, a friend gave it to me. So I didn't want to show him any of the others, but they're all the same. And then I was told that the Bigfoot said they are programmed for me to hold on to during meditation. And so that's what I use them for. At least it's something physical that they gave me, and I honor that. I mean, it's neat, it's cool, and it's all these new things, and you go out and to other people to help analyze it and to try to figure out what it's about. So that's also evidence of a sort, but if I showed it to a regular physical scientist, he would say to me, well, it looks like something you got in the bottom of your fishbowl, one of these colored rocks, and I wouldn't pay any attention. Recordings, I have recordings of howlings, of babbling, of even words, and I don't know what the words are. To me, my first impression is it's of a Native American language. And this was taken from Texas. However, the ones in Tennessee do know a lot of Cherokee. So how would they know that? The ones in South America, down in the Amazon, seem to know the local Indian language. So when there's encounters there, the people who live in the deep rainforest say, well, yeah, when he talked to me telepathically, he spoke my language. So I don't know if they're simply monitoring people and in time they learn the language, because some of it was choppy. For example, one woman in Texas asked this female Bigfoot and said, well, can I take a photograph of you? And she said, no. And she said, well, why not? Said, if photo men come with guns. So that's how she spoke, often with words missing. So I don't know if somehow it can be transliterated in the mind because of the telepathy, and they're speaking a entirely different language, but it's translated as English to me and Spanish to someone else and French to someone else. I don't know. It's speculation at this point. So there's a lot of vocalizations, and I have a lot of this, and a lot of it's already been analyzed. And plus the 106 cases of encounters with Bigfoot, UFOs, and telepathy. And of course, my friend Lynn, who is from England visiting me, has had 3 encounters this week, and yesterday afternoon, the telepathy that she, in first time in her life. And, you know, when I said to her on the phone, well, you know, what did he say when he spoke to you? She says, well, he didn't speak to me. I said, no, you just said he gave you all this information. She says, yeah, but it was all in my head. She wasn't even, she not, you know, even used the word mental telepathy or anything. She said, just, it was all in my head that he did it, and he didn't move his lips, and so on. So people who are not looking for them are having lots of experiences as well. We really need to revamp the scientific paradigm. The empirical method is put together, and at times I've actually seen hardcore scientists tailor that information to a phenomena in order to come up with the results that they wanted, which was negative. And I thought, that's not, they're being subjective and they don't realize it. They're manipulating all of these factors and coming up with something that says, see, this isn't a real phenomena. Well, you can't convince me this isn't a real phenomena after all these years and all these encounters and all the paranormal stuff that has happened to me. And believe me, the other people, the 106 people that I spoke with, will also stand firm on this. So it needs to include, especially include interviews by a scientist or by a researcher, because one anthropologist said to me, well, people are so unreliable, you know, you can't really go by what people say. So, you know, that's totally unreliable information, therefore it's unscientific to even use it. I disagree. I totally disagree. And some people are so articulate and they know what they've experienced, and many of these witnesses or percipients have multiple sightings and multiple experiences with these beings over and over again, so they have a chance to analyze a little bit and to see really what's going on and then report it to me, and it all matches up. Every bit of it does. So these 106 people, these experiencers, are objectifying my own reality and what I experienced over 700 times. So I feel we have to revamp the scientific model in order to include these elusive phenomena and stop rationalizing universal nature, because that's exactly what they're doing, and they're missing out on these other phenomena. I mean, think of it, only about 1% of what we see physically that's real is going on around us. Another 99% that's going on all around us is invisible to the naked eye. I believe certain pets, certain animals, and so on can see auras and different things. I've never had any children, but when I'm near an infant, I don't know how many times, you know, I just see the infant for the first time. He'll look at me, and I'll walk across the room or back and forth. He'll follow me. And the mother says, gee, that's strange. Why is he doing that? I never saw him do that before. Is he seeing an aura or something that other people can't see that's a part of me, an extension of me? And that's all this is. The Bigfoot researchers say, hey, I don't agree with what you're saying. This is all baloney. I says, it's only an extension of the research you've done that you've omitted. That's all it is. So why be threatened by it? But they're very threatened. The first time it happened to me was actually in Oregon, that I had encounters there, but it was very confusing to me. 2 weeks later in Wisconsin, I was working at the time as an assistant director of a Native American agency in Milwaukee. And as I said, I've studied with them, lived with them, and worked for them, and my ex-wife was Navajo. So I was invited out to some property, and they were going to assess the land, and they had a medicine man there that could speak several native dialects. And there was myself and I believe one other non-Indian there. And I think there are probably, I believe, 9 or 10 people. And we sat around and were talking, they were talking about this, and I was just listening to everything. And then I got up and decided to walk around, and I was walking around near the woods by myself, and this voice came out and said to me, I am the Sasquatch man, and I am here watching you and have been watching you for a long time, for many, many years, longer than you know or understand. I looked around and I didn't see anything. And I said, what was that? I mean, it was literally like somebody said it right in my ear. I could hear it plain as day. And he repeated himself several times and started talking to me about things. And I said, where are you? And he said, I'm here. I'm here watching you and have been watching you for a long time. And he kept repeating that because he realized I didn't get it. I was too unevolved, too naive about this kind of communication. Within a few minutes, I left where that was happening and walked a little distance away because I was getting freaked out a little bit. Not fearful, just stunned and not understanding what was happening. This other voice came through that was very sophisticated this time. It wasn't as choppy, and said, I am a star person, and I too have been watching you for a long time, for many years, longer than you know or understand. And I went like this and was looking around, and I says, well, I wonder where this guy is. I don't see any spaceship or anything like that. And he says, yes. He says, I'm in a UFO, as you people call it. And then I realized, as every time I thought something, it was talking to him, that I'd realized that he was reading my mind, literally. And so we talked for a while, but I started to get freaked out, and I went back to the people. I says, well, I'm going to go back to my Indian friends, and it's all going to go away. This just really didn't happen. And so I kind of snuck in between and sat down and said, there, everything's normal and fine. And they were talking. And one of the Native Americans said to the head of house, who had just purchased his property, he was Indian, and said, you know, you should build your sweat lodge over there. And he said, oh, no, I won't build it over there. And the medicine man spoke up and said, yes, I agree. He said, that would be an excellent place for a sweat lodge. He said, you should build it there. And the head of house said, no, I will not build it there. He says, the star people have been landing their spaceships there, and I don't want to disrupt their activity. And I stood up, and I did about a 100-yard dash. I probably could have made it in the Olympics. It overwhelmed me. That reality hit me so hard. And I went back to the house, and I sat on their picnic table for a half hour until they were through, and then one at a time they left in their cars. And then the head of house came over to me, and he looked at me and he said, you know, he says, animals are very attracted to you. And I said, oh, you know, like, why would you say that? You know, I thought he was going to discuss, you know, the meeting. And he said, I saw you with my guard dog. He says, my best friend can't get near that dog, and you were hugging him. And, you know, and I didn't, you know if that was right or wrong at the time. He's telling me this, and he started walking away, and he turned around and looked back at me, and he says, and Sasquatch is also attracted to you. Wow, you know, so I finally, before I left, I asked him, I said, may I have permission to come out here? Because I just met him, and to camp out here. And he says, yes, you can. He said, the spaceships land over here on the high tension lines, and then later he said sometimes we have a half a dozen people, Native Americans, watching all this, and then it lands somewhere And they go inside, and within 30 minutes, he said, he's got 1 or 2 Sasquatch looking in the window, and his guard dog's trying to get underneath the couch, which only has about 2 or 3 inches, you know, because it's freaking out with that kind of energy that they emit that's very alien. So anyway, that started me off. It really started me off. And the interesting thing about it, when I was home back in Milwaukee, the second night after this happened, I woke up in the middle of the night and someone said to me, "Wake up, my friend, we are here." And I was facing the wall, asleep, and I was in the middle of a dream. So if I'm woke up in the middle of a dream, it means you're sleeping deeply, and I'm real groggy, you know. But I was awake instantly. And all the times they've ever done this, and other people have told me the same thing over all these years, that they wake up, it's like they had about 3 cups of espresso. They're just wide awake instantaneously. And I'm looking at the wall and I thought, my God, somebody broke in and I'm being burglarized. You know, they're being funny and say, "Hey, my friend," you know. But I felt this energy behind me of something, and I turned around and rolled over, and there's a Sasquatch standing right there in my bedroom. But I could see through him, and he was about 8 feet tall, and he slowly, literally, went through the floor in order to, so his head was even with mine, about 3 feet away. And I moved like this a little bit to roll over a little bit more to get a better look, and he quickly turned his head and turned sideways, and then he ruffled, and I could see all the wrinkles in his face, and then his eyes shifted back and forth, the pupils. So I said, wow, they're actually telling me by their actions that they have the ability to astral project and to control this type of thing. And of course, this is one of the dimensions that they're able to deal with. They have access to several dimensions, so I discovered. And this is what they were doing. So they would come and visit me periodically. Sometimes there'd be different ones. And then when the same one came again, I said, "Oh, you've come again." I said, "I haven't seen you for 2 weeks." You know, you start to recognize them because they're like people, and they are people. So these are the experiences that I started to have, and it goes to great detail in my book, The Psychic Sasquatch. Now, back in the winter of I had experiences all the time, and actually the first 2 years I was in and out of denial. I just really had a hard time with it. I was excited that it happened afterwards, said, "Wow, that is really special and rare," and you know, I like to tell people, but I'll never tell anyone. So, but I'm a responsible scientist, and I'm responsible for this information that I've collected, and I decided people should know about it. And I feel that this is a part of my life's purpose here, not only to do healing work and to help others with cancer and life-threatening diseases, but also to share this kind of information. Because our world has gotten so small by communication, and because we're overpopulated and we're using up all the natural resources, we need to start learning from other beings that have far more respect for Mother Earth, our Mother Earth, than we do.
If you've got some video to do, it's 10 o'clock. I would suggest we see that.
Okay. Now, I guess I've been speaking for just a little over an hour here. Recently, actually, there's been a man in Pennsylvania that's been having all kinds of experiences for the last 3 years, and where they've talked to him, where they've piled branches up and so on. It looks like they're building a lean-to. And his horse injured itself, and he was thinking if he should get a vet or not, and he waited overnight and put it in the barn because he has a small horse ranch. And the next morning he got up early, and he was looking towards the barn, and he saw 2 Sasquatch run out of the barn. And he was a little stunned, and he went into the barn, and his horse was healed. He was no longer injured. And plus, the mane was braided. And nobody can kind of make any understand this, but in Russia, they've reported, the scientists there report that the creatures there will go into a barn at night and for whatever it is they do with horses, but they seem to like horses and they braid their hair. For what reason, it's you know, I don't know. But it did with this person. Then he told me that, he called me and he said, I really need to talk with you. He said, my next door neighbor was on her way to work in the morning, and it was just getting light. It was still dark, but just getting light. And this is all, the area they're in is very, very heavily wooded. And she went around the corner, and there was a spaceship in the middle of the road. And to avoid it, she tried to turn, and she spun out and hit a tree. And what she noticed was about 18 or 20 figures walking around the spaceship, which were ETs and Sasquatch, several Sasquatch. And the Sasquatch, she said, had human-like faces, not ape-like faces. And she says one of the Sasquatch, a 10-footer, went over and opened the car door and helped her out. She said she was not at all afraid because they were so kind and they weren't scary or anything like that. And they helped her, and the next thing she knew, she was in an ambulance and was brought to the hospital. So I will actually have this in my next book, which I'm writing now, called The Sasquatch People, in great detail. But this happened last month. It happened about 4 weeks ago. So this stuff is happening all the time, but they didn't want to report it to anyone. That is, to MUFON or discuss it or have their names out there at all. So I do have anonymity. I don't reveal people's names. Some people, if it meant anything, if a scientist came to me and said, I really want to interview one of these people myself, I would get permission to see if they would want to talk to this person. So, but again, they don't want to be made fun of. I can come back to some of this other stuff, but why don't we start by having a few slides here, and I'll go through this with you. Now, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if this is the light shining on it, so it could be a little clearer with that big light. I don't know if it should be shut off and a softer light put on. But Bigfoot is all over the United States, Alaska. There was a sighting 2 months ago in Alaska. It was on the highway. 2 men were driving along 1 o'clock in the morning, and it stopped and backed up because they thought, gee, did you see that guy back there? He got stuck out here somewhere. In Alaska, you don't want to leave people out there. And they backed up and rolled down the window and looked up, and Sasquatch took one look at him and turned and walked away. And it was a Bigfoot. So it's all over the world. In Mexico, they have the same thing going on there. This is going into the cave in Idaho. When I was researching there last December of 2003, where we had a few of us went in to examine and to gain evidence and to leave food for them. Once a month, the man was bringing in about 40 pounds of food. So, and trying to gather evidence. He's the one that was trying to do with the saliva analyzed, have the DNA analyzed. We're crawling underneath here at the far end of the cave. It was very, very long and large, and here it narrowed, and there's a big chamber on the other side. The Sasquatch could crawl through there and go to this other chamber. And there was like an altar in the other chamber, and he was leaving peanut butter, dipping it in, and leaving it around, smearing it around in order to get fingerprints and those kinds of things. leaving a lot of carrots and apples. I brought a big, huge jar of peanut butter to leave for them. And they know how to unscrew and screw caps and everything, so that's very basic for them. These are some of the casts that my associate took, and some of them are handprints and some are footprints. The ones to the left and the other one, the long ones, everyone says they're handprints, including myself. We've never seen anything with fingers that long. Keep in mind, there's all different kinds of Sasquatch out there. There seems to be, I don't know, my belief is that the ETs are genetically engineering them to make different kinds or subspecies or whatever of these Sasquatch people. And so you have some that have, you know, 3-toed, 4-toed, 5-toed, and some that look different, far different than others. Some are more ugly looking, some are plain, some are very nice looking, and so this indicates that there may be experimented. Some have tails, which is extremely rare, and you know, 99.9% of them do not, at least based on reports. These are highly unusual tracks. Dmitry Bayanov from the Darwin Museum in Moscow, a hominologist, sketched this based on the Roger Patterson film of the female Bigfoot. He said this is what the face should look like, and this is his rendition of it. Peter Byrne, another veteran researcher who's done a lot of fine work over the years, had I believe it was a bi-monthly newsletter, and this was one of on the cover that someone had sketched, and this is what they said the Sasquatch looked like when they saw it. This gives you an idea. It does have kind of a conical shaped head or a sagittal crest, it's called in gorillas, on top. And of course you can see it has a supraorbital ridge that sticks out above the eyes and so on, almost in a slightly Neanderthalic look. This is one that is a mannequin. This is a mannequin. At the time, I believe the man spent $15,000 back in the 70s. So that was a lot of money back then for him. The ones that he saw in Iowa, and he followed them everywhere. And one day he was sitting in his truck going through maps out in the woods on a back road, and his window was down, and all of a sudden these two arms or hands came through the window and picked him up and just shook him a little bit and set him back down, and they said, "Don't follow us anymore." And so he never did, but he had that put together, and you know, why argue, you know, with somebody like that? What's there to argue about? So he went around and showed this for several years, and this is from a picture. Now, these didn't come out too good. This is sketched from Australia, from the Australian Yowie. One man who knew nothing about Sasquatch, or very little about it, said, "Oh, I know why they call them Yowies. When the people see them, they're so frightened that they yell, 'Yowie!'" And of course, that's not true. It is a Aboriginal name that means elusive spirit. And so there's a male and a female. One has the female has the pendulous breasts, and it gives you an idea of what they look like in Australia. The Australian Aborigines did kill a few of them, and I believe the American Indians did too, from time to time. And sometimes it was over food and other issues. But the Australian Aborigines, it depends, again, which tribe. Most of them, especially those in the northern part of Australia, said that they learned from them. Now, this is the one that was taken at Bluff Creek, California in 1967, and it gives you an idea. It's a female, and another thing they discovered, that when it turned sideways, they did see the rippling of the muscles, but they also saw a huge bulge, which indicated, one of the anatomists said that it indicated that it had been injured at one time, and it's like a knot, big knot in the muscle. So how could that be other than when it turned just right and then it bulged out on one of the frames? Because the Russians went frame to frame, and there were well over 200 frames that were taken, and they went through everything, and they had it for 6 years, and they had anatomists, people who studied biomechanics, all these different things. In this country, they simply poo-pooed it. They said, bring us a corpse, and then we'll start helping you in analyzing it. This is another picture of the same Sasquatch. This is a rendition that's been put together based on computer enhancement, and to give you an idea of what the Bluff Creek Sasquatch supposedly looked like. In Tibet and in China, in some of the temples, they have sketches like this of the Yeti, which is a part of the phenomena. Again, this is all over the world. There's nothing new about it, absolutely nothing new. This was taken back, geez, I think 800 years or something, but this was a long time. I had forgotten, but a long, long time ago. And this, again, from Asia. Okay, this particular time, this is myself with what looks like hair. Now, I obtained this through some rangers that it was found in the Mount Adams Wilderness, which is just north of Hood River, Oregon, but in Washington State. And I lived, Comanche, my black lab, and I, we lived there in a teepee for almost 3 months. And I had 4 Sasquatch encounters, and I saw 10 spaceships during that time frame. I collected some samples from this, and everyone said, well, it looks like Sasquatch hair or something. And so I had it analyzed, and it's not hair at all. It's a fiber. What's it doing in the deep wilderness? Dr. Sigismund, you'll see him in a few minutes on a short video, explaining that he went to a fiber expert who had 29 years experience, that did all kinds of work analyzing for people, and he had a complete book of every fiber. Once, because Dr. Sigismund uses the electron microscope, which is the most sophisticated in the world, to analyze my stuff, all my samples that I collected. And when they couldn't find anything that matched it. And the guy, they weren't talking Bigfoot, none of this stuff. And he turned around and said to Dr. Sigismund, there's nothing on this planet that even matches anything that's in this fiber. He said, I have no idea what it is, but it doesn't seem like it's from here. And they weren't even discussing all this stuff. That was his objective opinion as an expert. And you'll see more later. Actually, when I was out to Mount Adams, one put his arm through the tent and put his hand on my shoulder. That'll be in my new book, because it's all the stuff that happened leading up to it and what happened after takes too long, but it's just another experience. It was interesting because the same Sasquatch, it was 6.5 feet tall. I went out, crawled out of the teepee one night to relieve myself, and when I looked up, it was fog everywhere, a full moon, and clouds drifting. And I looked up and I said, through this pine tree, and I said, gee, this is like the night of the Sasquatch. And I was giggling to myself, saying, this is typical of a movie. I mean, like like they have with werewolves come out and stuff. And it was beautiful, so beautiful and clear. And I just said that to myself about Bigfoot, and then turned to go back into the teepee. And all of a sudden, he said, I'm here, my friend. And he showed me, he was standing there, kind of hunched, with one arm dropped down. And he was a younger Sasquatch that was very interested in humans. And he had a real good personality. And he said, Kiwoni says, I was listening to you earlier while you were praying, he says, before you went to bed. Now this was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I went to bed about 9:30 or 10. And he says, I was listening to you earlier, and I was praying, asking God for guidance. And he said to me, Kiwoni, just keep working on yourself. Keep working on yourself. And he said, and I said, well, I have some other questions. He said, no, I have to go. He said, there's 4 other friends that are with me now, and I must go back to them because I'm leading their group. And then there's 3 kinds of telepathy. There's verbal telepathy, feeling telepathy, and visual telepathy. And he showed me through visual telepathy instantly the other 4, and they were like 5 feet tall, 5.5, and the biggest was about 6 feet. So they were a young group that he was taking across the property there and at the edge of the ranch, and said, I'll talk to you another time. And the next, 2 nights later, he came and put his hand right through and put his hand right on my shoulder. They've touched me either 4 or 5 times, at least 4 times, if not 5 times over the years. This is an area where I was having a lot of Bigfoot and UFO experiences at the edge of the Siskiyou Mountains in Oregon. And this is an area that nothing has grown in for years. And this man is a logger, and he went out there. He's the one that initially found it, and it's in a perfect circle. Like something had landed, burned all the area out, destroyed the vegetation, and hardly anything grows there now, but it's a perfect circle. So this is, again, right, very, very close to where and myself and other people were having encounters. This was taken, a sketch from a man in Australia where a spaceship had landed. Several cars were driving down way in the outback, had seen this, and when they got closer, they realized it was beside a road. And walking up from the ship beside the road was a ape-like creature with some kind of a device in its hand. And of course, it looks just like a Sasquatch. So encounters like this and reports abound in Australia. Okay, this is a picture taken in Florida in October of 2000. I don't know how well you can see it. It was on its knees. A retiree was in his backyard and walked out there and saw something moving around, and he wasn't trying to take pictures, but he just happened to have his camera in his hand, and he walked up to the edge where the woods started. And where the woods started, he saw something right in front of him that was behind this saw pimento bush. And he just pulled up and snapped it, and then it stood up. It was, he said, about 7 foot tall, it kneeling down. And when it stood up, he turned and ran back to the house. He's called, I think his wife called the police and said, there's a orangutan on the loose, so would you tell the zoo or whatever that it's over here someplace, because that's what they thought it was. Okay, this is the gemstones that were given to me. These did not come out very well, but the white one on the bottom and the 2 others are the red ones. They just didn't come out very well. This is my ring. I wore a ring for years, and I really liked the stone, and the shank on it was so thick. It was triple shanked and made of silver, and it was very solid, and I liked it, but it never fit my finger very well, and all day long I would always twirl it back on top to see the polished agate that was on top that was so pretty. And when a Sasquatch put its hand on my right shoulder, it was just the day before that ring, I took it off and put it on my desk at home, and I realized there was dirt all around the silver that had collected right by the base of the stone. So I took the time to clean it, and I cleaned it just right. And of course, I looked at it, and it just almost fell off because it was so loose, and I could see it was perfectly round. But after I put my hand on my shoulder, I felt this energy go down my hand, and it wasn't till I got home and went to take it off, I couldn't hardly get it off. It was ovular in shape. It was like the Uri Geller thing of you know, how he does spoons and he bends them, and other gifted people can do this. And it literally altered that. If I hit that with a hammer, I still can't bend it. But its energy that it had emitting down through my arm literally altered the shank on that ring. Okay, to the right, under an electron microscope, is what I believe to be Bigfoot hair. I can't prove it. I didn't pull it out of his body. I didn't take it from a corpse or anything, but it happened the day after I had some Bigfoot experiences where I was camped out and all this hair was there. So I sent it. This was when I was on an expedition in the Columbia River Gorge, and I sent it to Dr. Sigismund, and he used a bear fur on the other side, and it's 2.5 times thicker than bear fur. And plus, the follicles and everything on it are very different. Again, it shows some human characteristics and some animal primate characteristics, but still basically classified as unidentifiable. So this is a very interesting shot. Okay, what is this? This is this woman was having experiences up in Tillamook, Oregon, and she went out in February of 1987 rather, and on a picnic with her family and her grandchildren and stuff, and she had had several Bigfoot experiences and the telepathy. And after they had a picnic, her husband took her children, the adult children, for a walk while she took care of the 3 infants. And they had this was by a lake. And as soon as a while went by and she was tending to the children and they were sleeping, the infants, she heard some noise and she looked up and there were 4 Sasquatch standing at the edge of the woods. She said 2 juveniles that were about 5 foot, another about 5.5 feet tall. And these others were, she said one was about 8 feet tall and the other was 10 feet tall, and they walked towards her. She said one had blue eyes and the other had green eyes. And she started talking with them telepathically, and they walked right up to her, and one stood there, and the other said to her, "Oh, your children are very beautiful. They're very special." And he knelt down beside the child and leaned over very, very close to one of the infants. And she thought to herself, "Gee, I hope he doesn't hurt her." And the Sasquatch standing behind her reached over and put his hand on her shoulder and smiled, like they were reading her mind, and she didn't think that at that moment in time. She was just concerned about the children. But the other Sasquatch, who was knelt down, turned around fast and stared her right in the face. And they said, "Don't worry, we love your children." And she says to them, "Let me ask you, who are you anyway?" And he took a rock and knelt down and into the soil made these figures, these characters. And so they left. And when her husband came back, she showed him this, and he said he would do a plaster Paris cast of it. So they put a basket over it because it started to sprinkle a little bit, and he went back and made the cast. And this is how it came out. I went to the world-famous Dr. Barry Feld from Harvard University, and he analyzed this. He asked me where it was from, and I wouldn't tell him. I mean, what am I going to say? Oh, a Sasquatch, did this. And he's an expert with all kinds of petroglyphs and characters that he found in New England and other places all over the United States that matched up from that some were Celtic and so forth, and that was his expertise. In fact, he opened an institute down in San Diego. Now, he said that this is ancient Iberic. Ancient Iberic. That was mind-blowing when he told me. And he said it means protectors of the earth. Or he says, or protectors of that region. He says, whoever did this. He says, take pictures of it. He says, on the rock that you found it, because he finds them in rocks, and show it to me, and we'll, analyze it more. Of course, I never did because it was no rock, it was deliberately given to this woman by the Sasquatch. And of course, the Native Americans said, that they say they're keepers of Mother Earth, spiritual keepers. These are hands and the ones on top are feet taken in China. Back in the early 60s, these people were actually killed this creature that came into their village. It was about 5 or a little over 5 feet tall, and they were in the field with hoes and stuff, and they attacked the creature, and it stood there and did try to run instead of trying to communicate, and they beat it to death. And why they were doing that, the tears were rolling down the creature's face. So, to me, again, the creature was humanoid. So this was put in alcohol. The next day, they kept the creature. A biology teacher on a bicycle came through the village, and he preserved these in alcohol. This is a sketch I did of a Sasquatch that was coming to me that was half the ape-like kind and half the human kind. Now this one here was given to me by a man who's didn't want his name mentioned or anything about like that, and he said that he was simply on a hike, and he was an amateur photographer, and he heard all this noise, and he thought it was elk, because there was a lot of elk tracks in the area, and he started snapping pictures because the Sasquatch ran through, and he said there was one about 5 feet tall, and then this one he said was about 7.5 to 8 feet, and then there was one about 10 or 12 feet tall behind him, but he dropped his camera and he put it back down, which means he could have gotten a whole slew of pictures. That's sideways, but that's a little closer shot, a little different shot of it. Sorry about that. So this man said, he said, I don't want my name attached to it or anything like that. This is something that I accidentally found or took the picture of. This is in Pennsylvania, some of the things that the Sasquatch are doing. This area, this man outside of his ranch has seen the Sasquatch frequently there, found droppings, found tracks, and this is the area that they had telepathed to him as well. So it's very strange stuff that they're doing. What are they doing it for? And it's all deliberate, with like the branches are broken and then they use them as hooks to hook all this. That's upside down, but there's just more of it. Okay, this is a track 17 inches long by 7 inches wide, taken in the Siskiyou Mountains back in 1985, when I was having all kinds of encounters, both with ETs, ships, and with the Bigfoot people there. These are the kind that are the ancient ones with the human-like face. This one was taken in Washington State. It was the Bossberg sighting, which there were over 1,000 tracks. So many people said, well, you know, there was just somebody with a carved out tracks, but this one was a crippled one, and each time it was the track was slightly different, simply because it has bones in the foot that move that are not entirely flat. And this was taken, I believe this was, I can't remember, but it was back in the 70s. But there was a lot of tracks, and this is one of them because it was very unique. That's myself back in 1985 with some more tracks. This is one of the handprints. You see the one to the right is a right hand, but that doesn't look like a thumb, does it? The one on the left. It looks like an extension of a fifth finger instead of an opposable thumb, as all other primates, human and non-humans, have. This is Robert Watts. He's was the associate producer of all the Star Wars movies and all the Indiana Jones movies. And we were on an expedition in eastern Oregon, and this is where we were finding trees that were snapped down. They were about 3 inches across, 2 and 3 inches across in diameter, and they were snapped off. This is a sign the Bigfoot do this to claim that you're going into their territory. I've seen lots of this, and many other researchers find the same. This is a 3-toed one taken in Pennsylvania. Very unusual again. Why is it like this? Is it simply a freak of nature in this one, or is this a one that has been genetically engineered? We don't know. This is Rex Gilroy of Australia holding 2 separate tracks. One is of a Yowie, the other is of a Yeti from the Himalayas. And one could be the right foot and the left foot of the same being. What happened there? Okay.
10 more minutes.
Okay. This here is basically a Neanderthal track taken in Italy, and I wanted it as a comparison. It was found in lava. These are tracks that I found also in Oregon that I took in an area. This is from the Paluxy River, from the limestone deposits in Texas. This track is 65 million years old beside dinosaur tracks. Is this from a giant human or from a Sasquatch? I don't know. You see the human foot on the left beside it there? So they've been around a long time. Here's another track, a totally different one. Humanoid track, taken 65 million years old. This is 400 million years old, taken out of Utah, found by people who are digging coal. These are boot prints, but it has a trilobite in it, that it had crushed a trilobite when it stepped on it, and trilobites have been extinct for millions of years. So I wanted to show this in comparison to say there's a lot of evidence out there that's being ignored to say that, you know, the ETs and the Sasquatch have been around a long time, a lot longer than we have. There's handprints again. More handprints. This is a Sasquatch. In Australia, they claim that there's some that had been over 15 feet tall. This is an illustration done by an Aborigine. This is one I did, that one that used to come to me in Wisconsin all the time. Pleasant sort of a bloke. This was taken by Dick Robinson, the originator of the Grizzly Adams series. These are the ones that were coming to him. And he called them Sasquatch and Bigfoot interchangeably, but they were not, they say themselves, we are not Sasquatch. They have big feet and they have hair on their bodies. But these had small tails and they had human faces, but they had hair all over their body. So these are part of the ancient ones. I must say, when he showed me this, I just was polite about it, and I said, I can't relate to that. But since then, I've seen them this way. The female, one that approached me that was 5.5 feet tall, and she had a beautiful face, hair all over her body. And so right now, the ones in Texas are like this. So I don't understand a lot of this either. I'm still investigating and gathering data and trying to talk to other people who at least are in the same wavelength as myself, because the average Bigfoot researcher would say that this is not true, even though they've had zero experiences with the creatures. This is one that several people were meeting with and seeing in Oregon in 1985, 86. It's still going on to this day, as far as I know. And this is one of the ancient ones. They don't have the long, they're not all hunched over and their arms go down to their knees like the ape-like ones. So this is the female one. I hired an artist to do this. This is one in color. This next one may shock you, but this is the one I saw. And hopefully, I sent a copy of this down to Texas to the people down there on the farm, and I asked them to leave it out and to ask, they all have names, I don't want to say the name right now, but to ask her if she can relate to this. And the female that's been coming in down there says, oh, this looks a lot like my mother. So they want to meet with me, and I welcome that. I haven't met these only one other time before. And this is a chart showing of all the unusual things with hominids and all the artifacts that were found right up to about almost a half a billion years old on this planet that were all man-made devices. So that should give you some kind of an idea of how much science is off, especially anthropologists, in their claims of in fact, it was just on TV last night. I happened to glance on the news that they found a 100,000-year-old encampment. I believe it was in Colorado or Utah, somewhere in there. I'm going to look it up when I get back. And anthropologists have been saying, oh no, it's only 20 or 30, possibly 30,000 years that the Indians have been here. And it's saying actually other archaeologists actually have found that they're they've been here a long, long time, possibly for 500,000 years on the North American continent. I don't know that. These are just speculation. Now, I have two very short videos I want to play to top off the evening here that are very interesting, and I like to play the Sasquatch one that was taken. It was hooked up to a barn 6 feet high and left there. A Sasquatch steps in front of it. You'll see its back to you. It's looks 9 to 10 feet tall. And you can see like the dreadlocks or the mattedness in the hair. And they're having spaceships on the property. And these people are very conservative, very religious. They don't know what to make of it, and again, they got a hold of my book and contacted me, and I'm helping them and guiding them through this. And okay. Now, I admit it's going to be a little difficult for a few minutes. You can see the hair, matted hair or dreadlocks, as it moves around a little bit. If you look to the far lower right, you'll see eventually a little bit of its waist there, kind of a part, and then you'll hear, this is taken about 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Now you hear a jet going over, and it's going to move away from this. Why he stood in front of the camera, I don't know. But this is his back, of course. Now see down the bottom on the right, part of his waist, or his hip is? Watch carefully. Now, there's 3 more Sasquatch you're going to see. In the very center, way down the end, and a little bit to the left, at the far end. On the left, the greenery is actually a cornfield. Now, you'll see movement down there to either 1 or 2 Sasquatch moving around because they help themselves to the garden and they plant more stuff for them and tell them to help themselves to the vegetables. Now, there's one moving around. See it a little bit? In the very middle? Okay, that's not a very good one. But start to look there and stare there. One is going to come through the cornfield. So stare to the left. Now he'll come back in about 20, 25 seconds, and when he does, look carefully. It's an incredible shot that it's no doubt of what you're looking at, with a high, tall, conical head and everything. Here he comes. He steps over a fence. Now there'll be one more shot of a gray one. And these are difficult to get. I mean, this is extremely rare footage. Now, then he goes up in the corner. That's basically it. You'll see just a tiny bit of movement up in the left-hand corner as it moves through the trees, but that's it.
Where was that?
This was taken in Texas.
The one before was in Iowa?
No, all of these were Texas, right, that you just saw now on the same farm. So you can shut it down now and put in Dr. Sigismund. He's in for about 4 minutes.
I also do work as a forensic scientist. In the past 25 years, I've had over 600 cases involving physical evidence in both criminal and civil cases. At the medical college, I did research and taught in the area of neuroanatomy, the structure of the human brain. I met Mr. Lapsaritis back in the early 1980s. And it was shortly after I met him that he made a trip out to the Northwest. And a year later, I received from him a cast that he had taken at a ranch somewhere out in that area. A cast of what he thought was a Bigfoot. This is a cast that he sent to me. And I took this cast to the medical college and had it examined by a number of gross anatomists who are very familiar with the structure of the human body, including the foot. They indicated that if this was faked, the individual who faked it must have been a very, very competent anatomist. It has all the features and all of the contours that one would find in a human foot. It does not have the arch that a normal foot has, which would indicate that the individual from which this came, if he was human, was an extremely heavy person, possibly weighing more than 500 or 600 pounds. I had the cast for some years, and within the last 2 or 3 years I examined it more closely, and on the bottom, where the toes are, I found what would be called dermal ridges. These are the impressions that one has, the same impressions that one would have from your fingers. Only these would be on the toes. Dermal ridges are the source of fingerprints and toe prints. An examination of these under a microscope and with a hand lens revealed fine contours which would be almost impossible to fake. That has led me to the conclusion that these are indeed real. You can see where the arrows are pointing, there appear to be ridges, which are indicative of a humanoid individual. A few years later, Kiwani sent to me some additional evidence in the form of hairs, what he thought were hairs from a Bigfoot. An examination of these hairs under a microscope revealed to me that they were humanoid, but very unusual in the fact that they had a very thick diameter and a very thick medulla. A thick medulla is characteristic of animal hairs, not human hairs. On the other hand, the medulla itself and the construction of the scales and so forth would be more indicative of human. I could not identify this as belonging to any large mammal such as a deer or a horse. It did not belong to a cat or a dog, but it very definitely was humanoid in nature, but very unusual because of the extremely thick medulla, which was not characteristic of human hair, and the very thick shaft. I believe this could possibly have come from Bigfoot, but since we have no other hairs to compare it with, that is only speculation. I believe it was. Kiwani was also doing some exploring out in the northwest and came upon a ranger in a forest area who said that he had seen a lot of UFO sightings. And he showed Kiwani a very large piece of hair, or what appeared to be hair, black fibrous hair-like material, about 2 feet long. And he wondered if this could possibly be connected in some way with Bigfoot. I received a small sample of that hair, and when I received it, I discovered very quickly, after putting it under a microscope, that this was not human hair at all. In fact, it wasn't hair at all of any kind. It was a fiber. I then took it to a metallurgical lab where they were able to look at this fiber using a scanning electron microscope and energy dispersive analyzer and try to identify what kind of fiber it was. After an intensive effort on the part of the laboratory, they could not identify this as belonging to any fiber known to man. A search of the textbook on fibers, which listed thousands of fibers, failed to reveal any fiber with the characteristics that this one had. It had a high concentration of carbon, it had magnesium and zinc. On the other hand, its structure and chemical analysis did not fit that of any known fiber that is in the classical textbook of fibers. Therefore, this possibly could be something, if one were to speculate, that might have come from the UFOs, if indeed there were UFOs there, and indeed if they were from another world. These are the fibers that I found. These are the fibers that Kiwani sent to me. And again, I could not identify them, nor could a metallurgist identify them as any fiber that was listed in the catalog of all the known fibers in the world.
And just to wrap this up, I want to show you, this is another picture here of a Sasquatch taken in 1986 by a tourist that took it at Bush Art Gardens in Victoria, Vancouver Island, British Columbia, and it's way in the back. You can barely see it, and he didn't know it was there. And when it was blown up, got a beautiful picture of what appears to be a Sasquatch. We need more and more research, mostly field research. It's not being done properly, it's not being done objectively, and there is no processing house of science in order to put this information together. The researchers are very guarded on anything they find, and they're very opinionated and very subjective. We need some changes being made, because my evidence based on my research shows that there is truly a Bigfoot UFO psychic connection. Thank you very much.
Our thanks to Kiwani for giving such an excellent presentation on such an elusive subject. I know it's his life's work, and we appreciate you being here. Thank you. Guys, it's really late. I'd like to open it up for, I'm going to give 3 people a chance to ask questions, so the first 3 people up here to the mic over here on this side can ask questions, and then we're going to call it an evening, okay? Thanks much, and please, step up to the mic. No mic?
Questions?
Yeah, I was interested, do you have any idea, can you say any more about the relationship of the ETs and the Sasquatch, and possibly which types of ETs the Sasquatch are associated with?
They seem to be associated with the Nordic types, the ones that I've seen 7 different races of ETs, and it seems to be affiliated with those from the Pleiades, that region. And yet, I think that some Sasquatch were taken and altered by other beings that may be using them for, heavy work and so on, that may not be as benevolent. But these certainly are, and they've been proving it to me for 25 years by being around, and only positive things have happened when they come around.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
If you were to boil it down, your years of research, what would you say? Neanderthals or Wookiees?
Well, for a while, because I studied anthropology and that, the theory is, it's Gigantopithecus that Bigfoot is, which is a huge bipedal ape that never became extinct, that they found some teeth and jawbones from China and from northern India, and they said, well, it went across the landmass over to, during the Ice Age and so on to the United States. But, I used to go along with all that, but as time goes on and you experience things, and the Star people and the Bigfoot people told me certain things, and there's a lot of books out there now that's saying that all of us, are really from another planet, that we were brought here millions of years ago, and that there's been all kinds of beings on this planet. So I think that they were brought here. That's what they said, they were brought here, so I don't buy that they're part of the Neanderthal at all.
If they're Gigantopithecus, I think it's an Australopithecine, one of the Australoids, before they really became Homo sapiens.
Right,
Homo sapien Neanderthals, Homo sapiens sapiens.
Well, they do miscegenate. The Bigfoot do, and have they miscegenated with humans. I mean, this has happened.
They can mate with humans?
Yeah. So
Why do you feel that?
Well, I was told this several times, and one approached me, a female. So, and yet, if we don't have the same number of chromosomes, then you can't mate. I mean, you know, why doesn't a giraffe mate with a zebra? Well, they have totally different chromosomes. So when they split, you know, during meiosis, then you need, you know, 23, with a human, 23 chromosomes in male and female to make up the 46. So it's something's going on here that almost seems science fiction. But I want more proof of a lot of things, but yet I don't believe they're lying to me. And that people who had experiences, I don't believe they are lying to me at all, because it all matches up, and I kept over and over again are getting more people coming into saying the same things. Yes, sir.
Okay, I have a combination of questions and comments. Obviously, there's no smoking gun here. There's been no Bigfoot graveyard ever found. There's been no live Bigfoot that's presented himself for scientific examination to verify his presence. They're obviously not posing for photographs. So you're basically dealing with one of two possibilities. Their home is not in this time zone or this space. Either they are coming through a time warp from a previous time on this planet, or they're coming through a portal from the parallel universe. And also in the general field of cryptozoology, you have to lump them in with the Mothman, the Chupacabra, the Flatwoods Monster, or whatever creatures, or even the aliens themselves.
Yeah, and your question is, then?
Have you ever been confronted with the men in black, or have you had your phone tapped, or had your mail opened, or any other mysterious
I've had my phone
interference?
tapped. I've not seen the men in black. However, one woman who was having experiences that they were impregnating her and then later taking the fetus. She was from New York. She lived in the country, and she was freaking out, and she read an article about me and looked up my name and called me. And she used to call me every so many weeks. And then a couple months went by, I didn't hear from her, and she called me again. And I said, why didn't you call me back? I said, I never did get your phone number. And she said, oh, well, I lost your phone number. And for 2 days I looked for it, and I kept saying, I wish I had his number. And she says, one morning, right after my husband went to work, there was a knock on the front door. And I went to the door, and there was this strange-looking man in a black suit and black hat that looked very anemic. And I knew he wasn't from here. And she said, he went and he had something in his hand, and he went like this, and she said she opened the door partway, and he handed her something, and she grabbed the piece of paper, and she closed it and quickly shut the door. And when she opened it up, it was my phone number. And she quickly looked outside, and she has a huge lawn. They have a big house and a huge lawn, and there's nobody there. So that's the only affiliation of the Men in Black that I'm aware of. And as far as parallel universes, there's something going on that we live in a multi-dimensional universe, and there are beings coming through, whether it's Mothman or Chupacabra, that I believe that are possibly coming through a vortex, a door leading to another dimension. The Native American people told me this. I found many different vortices using my map dowsing. I'm a master dowser. And then going out in the field using L-rods. And I found these places, and then I would camp out there, and everything would start happening. And the people would say, when I spoke to some of the Sasquatch, they said, yeah, well, I came through the door. And, you know, it's just, there's nothing there. It's just an invisible place, but they know where it is and when it can be opened.
My final comment be conversely, there's evidence for man in past history outside of the normal accepted evolutionary timeline. You probably heard of Michael Cremo in his book Forbidden Archaeology.
Yeah, I know him and have been in conferences with him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and wherein supposed early man also coexisted with the Neanderthal at his time when he was supposed to have lived. So here you have this crisscrossing
Yep.
of timelines. And
There's no real continuity there.
Yeah.
Other than if anthropologists looked at the evidence that Michael Cremo presents, they would just be grabbing at straws, making some excuses up simply because if all what they believed for the last 150 years would be fantasy land. So they're in school teaching and universities and so on, they've been teaching rubbish. So you think, you know, their egos aren't going to allow that to happen. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of revamping that needs to be done, and you need to look holistically at all the evidence, not just small portions of it, in order to piece this thing together. Once again, thank you very much.